Welcome to part 3 of the Luxembourg campaign abridged in Hunt's Iron Fort, where previously we saved France from the Italian invasion, or we probably did, and then after the Allies cleared away Germany from our border, we were able to commit to the counterattack in France and we pushed Italy out entirely, probably with help from some of our allies. But yes, the war in Europe came to a pretty successful conclusion. Germany got taken out. But then France decided to declare war on the Allies, and they're also at war with the Soviet Union. So the conflict remains on our very doorstep. This time we're going to be attacking France again, but this time controlled by France. And we're going to have quite a lot of help actually from our allies, because Belgium and the Netherlands are attacking France at the same time, and as mentioned, the Soviet Union was already in the middle of an invasion of France. So perhaps the French Empire has bitten off more than they can chew. They do lose some ground right away. After things calmed down, I tried to make an attack myself to have a little bit of a contribution. This attack wasn't going very well, and then the moment I stopped, suddenly attacks happened all over the place, and this is a pattern I've noticed in this game. The AI, the allied AI, will make attacks when you stop making your attacks. So if nothing's happening on a front and you spend one day attacking and then stop, suddenly the AI will turn on and start making attacks themselves. In this case, you can see the attacks all over the place are quite positive ones, so they should have just done this earlier really. We pushed the enemy back a little bit more. My attack actually didn't go that well in the end. This one spot next to me is very heavily defended. But the other pushes went well, and they made it all the way to Paris, and the UK has made a little bit of a landing there by the looks of things. Overall, France is in enormous trouble, and the war for France is going to be easier than I initially expected. They were, after all, just recently owned up by their war with Italy, so the chances were they weren't going to be in a particularly strong position. And indeed, we soon join both the Allies and the Soviets, who are now officially in the Comintern, a different faction to the Allies, working together here to take down the world's mutual enemy, the French, and it goes pretty well. We slam them into this little pocket and attack from all sides, gradually shrinking that pocket and causing the divisions to get deleted as well. I mentioned before that's one of the nice things about trying to fight the enemy while they're surrounded. They can't retreat and they just disappear. And that's a big deal because in battles it's actually pretty hard to kill the enemy. Generally they'll survive multiple battles that they've lost. You can't chase down routers or anything like that. You have to surround them and force them to just be deleted by the game to actively kill the enemy. So eventually the French Empire capitulates, their territory is gone, and we're here at the peace conference. The thing is, I seem to have shown up late or something because it's all already happened. On the right there you can see tons of provisions have already been made, and I'm not allowed to suggest anything, so we can't do the thing where we sit around in the corner charging up peace points until we can eventually tell the French to become communist or something like that. Instead, we can't make any demands. I think essentially every possible demand was made by the first people to lay out their claims. So tons of territories changing hands there. The Soviets are setting up billions of communist puppet states all over the world. And France, for the most part, actually just comes back. As you can see, they don't seem to lose all that much in the end. They are now also communists. It's now French Commune instead of French Empire. That should help us out because it will make them less likely to go ahead with that plan we saw them doing in the past where they wanted to invade us, since we're now in the same faction. The French Empire abroad was absorbed for some reason into the Kingdom of Italy in the peace treaty. And that's a bit strange because Italy are kind of on the losing side. I guess that peace wasn't part of the original World War II, which is still going on. So Italy gained massively from the fall of France, but we're also still at war with Italy, so their massive gains will now have to be undone by us. There's also a war going on in Asia still as the Raj and China fight it out. But in Europe, things are pretty calm. We could just sit around for a while and, well, what I wanted to do was try to extract some sort of benefit from having won our little bit of the war. And the one thing I found I could do is ask for control of occupied territory. Not many people were interested in this, but I eventually got the Netherlands here to give me the territory right next door to me. I wasn't quite sure whether this was a good idea though, because while gaining some occupied territory gives you a tiny bit of the manpower there, you can see we've now got a few people to spare, you also have to expend manpower in order to garrison the territory to reduce its resistance to occupation. So in the end, we might actually be making the manpower situation worse by biting off more than we can chew, so to speak, by trying to control an area that's like 5 times the size of Luxembourg. The thing about this whole occupation system is that I didn't really get it. What I thought it meant when it was saying we need this many garrison units to stand in this area was that I needed to detach a division from my army and have it just go and stand there. But I later learned the garrison system's a little bit more abstract than that. You have garrison armies that are invisible on the map, and they just draw from your manpower automatically. So what I really need to do is just have some people. They will garrison this area in the background, and then resistance won't be an issue. And there is also a way for me to get some people off of the allies to go and do that for me, so I could actually occupy a large bit of territory using allied garrison troops, invisible guys. But all that was stuff I discovered after doing this maneuver. Instead, we just take the territory, fortify it against France just to be safe. And then, after sitting around for a while, I eventually realised, well, the war is still going on, we might as well go and help. So now it's going to be a bit of a world tour in this campaign. We need to go and finish up all of the other bits of the war so we can officially win. To start with, I've come down here to Northern Africa to attack Algeria and the like, where the Kingdom of Italy, now with control of the French Empire, is still going strong. The Allies were pushing them for a while, but then they stopped, but that's where I come in now. I can start doing a bit of a push. I found this little weak spot on the coast that we can sneak into. And with my help, we can start opening up new angles of attack and doing the thing I mentioned where us attacking kind of persuades the AI nearby to attack as well. I think they kind of smell that something's going on and they might as well go ahead with offensives they're planning even if they're not quite ready. Maybe that's how it works. So yes, we advance up and fight lots of small battles, which I won't bother talking about, but we helped the Allies, attacked from flanks and stuff, as we can see here, and over time the Italian troops got pushed back through these mountains. We're taking more and more casualties, and we now have fewer troops than we did with the French campaign, so our army's getting weaker and weaker, and there's not much we can do about that, for now at least. In world news, a new fascist faction has taken over Ireland, so Ireland's now even more fractured. There's Northern Ireland, Middle Ireland and Southern Ireland all on the same island, and they're going to be fighting each other. That should be fun for them, but back to the action. We push into Algiers itself. Always at the pride of place, the tip of the spear, the Luxembourgian army. We attack the nearby regional capital, I suppose, and important dock as well, since the docks will allow us to supply more troops and supplies actually into the area. That's another invisible mechanic. We need to secure supply lines, we just can't see them. And we do capture Algiers. This news is covering my glory, but I assure you it happened. And then we pushed on and encircled what remained of the Italian forces in this area. Here's me struggling though with the fact I want to not attack them, but I have an active offensive plan to attack them on that front line which defines the encirclement there. And what I was trying to do is re-click the execute plan button to cancel the execution of the plan, but no, you have to press the stop button. I don't know, I just feel like it would be natural if re-clicking the execute plan button would also pause it or something. Anyway, so we lose some troops doing some pointless attacks. We're still doing that right now really. What I was kind of hoping is that even though it's telling us we're losing, I'm going to just keep this battle going in the hopes that all these other troops that are wandering around might turn in and participate as well. But this was another case actually, where we fought on for a while. I eventually lost my morale and decided to stop, and once I wasn't attacking, the AI got a little bit more enthusiastic about attacking themselves. There's also the thing to consider where if you attack a losing battle, you can still win eventually because you can get owned sufficiently slowly that the enemy run out of organization and have to fall back, and in this scenario they can't fall back, all of their troops would just be deleted. So we could win that in a losing sort of way, and to cut to the chase, at some point that actually does happen. And there you go, the war in Northern Africa has now been effectively won. There are some pockets of resistance, but the United Kingdom, who now control basically all of the northern half of the continent, surely can deal with that. Now then, I'm looking over to Asia, which is becoming the primary theatre of the war. You can see the Soviets are gradually losing more and more territory to Japan. Luckily that territory is probably not all that useful, so it may not matter too much. And there's a battle still going on between the Raj and China. So now we are going to go over there. We're continuing our world tour, going to the other side of the world, and conveniently, this is when I discovered you can activate this strategic movement thing, I think it was called. There's some way to tell your guys to move faster, which would have been useful to know about before. It's a strange little mechanic, because it has a button for it, but the button doesn't do anything. However, the tooltip on the button mentions there's a keyboard shortcut for it, and the shortcut does do something. Well, that's how it seemed to be to me anyway. On the way across Russia towards the Eastern Front, our general falls ill. This reminds me of Metro Exodus, which I played recently. But anyway, we eventually arrive here on the front between the USSR and the Republic of China. I figured this front would only be defended by a couple of units and maybe we could punch through and get something going. And while there isn't that much here, there are various issues. They're all going to be fully entrenched because this front's been sitting here for a while. And our troops are going to be lacking for supplies because out here in the middle of nowhere, the invisible infrastructure supply system means we can't get food, bullets and fuel to our front line. That gives us all sorts of issues. Our organisation is going to start declining and our manpower will eventually decline as well. So because of that, after sitting around and looking at the front line for a bit, I thought we're probably never going to achieve anything. And instead I thought maybe there's a way for us to attack in a more infrastructure and more hopeful sort of way. That's why we're going to go on another world tour to switch from Siberia down to India, where the Raj have a lot of troops sitting around, and I figured there's kind of hope there that if we make a breakthrough, more guys will be able to exploit it. So we'll be switching from attacking Mongolia effectively to attacking China proper, although supplies will still be an issue down here because there are loads of low infrastructure jungle provinces. My initial plan, as you can see, was to actually move through Vietnam. We have military access with Vietnam because I think they're Comintern aligned or something like that, so we have good relations with them. I figured that I can use that as my unique advantage to go and attack China across this border, but as it happens, you're not allowed to do that. I suppose this makes sense. So Vietnam's neutral in the war, and there's some rule that you can't attack from a neutral party's territory into a belligerent party's territory. Therefore, I stand here for a while trying to work out why I'm not allowed to make these easy attacks against those single divisions, and eventually give up. You can see the game's pathfinding here is revealing the truth to me. I need to go and attack across an active front line. So we switch north to be on the front line between the Raj and China. What we have here is something of a newcomer's advantage because you can see lots of the enemy units are half dead, have no supplies, have suffered through attrition. It seems that because a long war's already been going on here, us showing up all fresh-faced gives us a key advantage. We can attack enemy armies that are much stronger than us, but because they have low organisation, they'll just move backwards, allowing us to potentially gain some territory. We saw there though, I was attacking and then I stopped and was looking around. I was trying to see if my attacks would again prompt my allies to make an attack. That's the theory I'm working with at this stage, and sometimes it does. In this case, they're less willing to help out. Eventually though, I decided to just attack anyway because this is one of these cases where the circle's going to be red. It's a losing battle of sorts, but you just win anyway because everything in the fight withdraws. It seems the circle represents the rate of change of organisation rather than which side will run out of organisation first. Or maybe it has something to do with the actual killing of both sides, I don't know, but it doesn't necessarily represent who's going to win, which is something that's a bit odd, I think. So we lose our way forwards and gain a new front line. We get counterattacked instantly, but we can take those guys down. And from here, we're going to have the same setup. You can see the army in front of us is pretty big. There's at least like 20 divisions there. I can't see on this preview. But there was a whole load of stuff in front of me, I seem to remember. And we can just plow into it because the vast majority of those troops will barely fight us. Like in the first 5 seconds of the engagement there, most of them are already withdrawing. They've obviously already been through a whole lot on this deadly front line, an attrition heavy front line as well, and now Luxembourg of all people showing up to suddenly attack you. That's just the last straw. Most of these troops will not fight under these conditions, thus allowing us to defeat a massively larger army and advance the front line a tiny bit more. So there you go, we've definitely helped out on this front. We seem to be achieving things that the Raj is failing to achieve. And on that note, I notice quite a lot of their troops are tied up north, where a massive pocket of enemy troops is surrounded and are just being contained right now. So I thought, let's go over there and try to end the containment. We can attack, and again, because the enemy don't have much organization, they've been out of supply for ages, we can just drive them backwards off the field and start shrinking this pocket down relatively easily. The only problem is that it's all mountainous and big regions, so it takes a long time to move anywhere, and we too are going to start running out of supplies soon enough. But still, as you can see, huge armies are being driven before the Luxembourgian vanguard. We're not even attacking with allies, it's just our expeditionary force annihilating everybody out here. In this case though, rather than pushing the enemy, I went backwards to get out of the mountains so that I could get my supplies back. This proved to be pretty effective, and I guess this gives the player a nice advantage over the AI. The AI probably wouldn't think to walk backwards and then walk forwards again to top up on supplies. You can have a couple of days of supplies in reserve, so we can now come back with our supplies full again to make attacks against empty supply units, and in that split second there, we barely saw it, we defeated something like 80 divisions at once in battle, and because they're surrounded, as mentioned earlier, they just get deleted. We have massively reduced the enemy's strength in the area, and we've shortened the front line for our allies. It seems Luxembourg are carrying this war. But of course, there is always more to do, so we move right onto the front line to look for more opportunities, and I saw one pretty easily actually. There's a point in the enemy's front line that they're not defending. A great point as well with those 3 rivers, an area that would be really easy for us to hold. I figured in this game that when a front line is established, if there's nothing on the enemy side, it automatically moves up and just causes your troops to like move up to the point of resistance. Apparently not, because our allies didn't notice. There's actually a full way to break through the enemy line here. The other side of these rivers also is barely defended. There are multiple routes we could take through to just claim territory. If we had like 10 divisions here, we could just spurge out in all directions and cut off a whole bunch of the enemy's line in the area and take them down. We can do what we can though with just our 3 divisions that I don't want to split up. We take another territory and then quickly win a battle against some nearby enemies who we've now cut off with that capture, so that's very nice. But what I wanted to do is not necessarily take down those troops, I wanted to move on through to see what we could do. So after seeing that they were going to resist me attacking them, I instead crossed the river to go to the city of Chengdu. Now, the partial motivation for this was that I'm running low on supplies, and you might know, if you know how the game works, that this is the wrong thing to do in this scenario. At this stage, I still hadn't grasped that there is this invisible supply line system. I thought supplies were gathered on a per region basis, like I think they are in some other Paradox games. So I figured, well, by taking this city, we'll have ample supplies for such a small army, and we can just sit here forever. But no, that's not how it works. You only have 1 supply depot per faction, and it's in your capital. So, since we soon end up surrounded by the enemy, there's now no connection between us and Luxembourg, meaning our troops are starving to death, and that's going to be an issue. You can see at this stage I still haven't quite worked that out. I'm trying to advance. I wasn't worried about being surrounded, I was just annoyed that my allies hadn't followed me through on this breakthrough. They could have claimed some more territory. But I thought, well, holding this city is going to disadvantage the enemy in some way. Perhaps it does, but not really. It's actually a bigger problem for me because of the supply issue. At some point I actually discovered what's going on. I think there's a tooltip somewhere that said something like you're not gaining supplies because there's no clear route to the capital, which reveals that there being a route to the capital matters, and that the route cannot include neutral powers or rivers or anything like that. You need a connected set of regions on your side of the war to be going back to Luxembourg. With that, I'm now turning around to head back to our front line with my breakthrough essentially having failed. We're going to give up our territory, and we're giving it up very slowly as well, because having no supplies means you can't move very fast. Still, the enemy aren't pressing us very aggressively. They're not going to take us down. The risk, of course, being that if they actually depleted our organization by just spamming us, we would all die, and that would be the entire Luxembourg army taken out. But no, they leave us be for the most part, and we are able to start fighting our way back to the front line. And in the end, we've still slightly moved the front line forwards because we're capturing a position that's on the other side of that river just to the west there. So we helped. But if there had been more troops to come through with us, I think we could have made a lot of progress with that little push. Eventually, I sit back in our territory and watch this tiny supply percentage. That definitely needs a UI overhaul. There's a way to see how many supplies you have, but it's pretty difficult, and there's no way to know how quickly you're gaining them as well. So I just have to sit here for an arbitrary time until the game decides I've got enough supplies. I think this did happen eventually, and then we can start pushing forwards again. Handily, by this point, a couple of allied divisions had set up along the line a bit closer to the area, so we had more local support. And there's this naval invasion going on down there from the United Kingdom. They might be pushing out from Hong Kong or something. That's going to distract the enemy a bit. So yes, now with the allies somewhat helping a bit, and with the supply situation slightly better, we're now not on 0 supplies, but we're still not in an ideal situation. We can push forwards and claim some territory, mainly helped out by the fact the allies start deciding to attack, and they start moving into some of the empty spaces as well to just claim territory. So let's go. Suddenly things are a bit more invigorated. Our supplies are at some point put back to full, so we're fine. We can join the allies in crossing the river to take that bit of territory. Chengdu has fallen again. And all over the place we're seeing fighting happening, and allied units just moving into empty spaces and taking out weak enemy spaces as well. This is great news, and we need to get to the front, because at the moment it looks like somebody else might be the vanguard and might be claiming the glory, but we can just be very aggressive and claim vast amounts of territory before the Raj do, so that the glory is ours. And yes, not much resistance. The Chinese only have a few divisions to cover this massive area, so we can just get loads of occupation down. Not sure whether this really makes a material difference, but in theory this is reducing their manpower and their ability to produce weapons, so it's going to damage them in the long term. And because lots of gaps are present in the front line where like rivers are, for example right here, we can go around the flanks of difficult to attack positions where the AI is just going to kill itself trying to make the river crossings, and instead not make the river crossings to then allow the AI to advance a little bit more successfully. So in this fashion, with a lot of micro, even though we only have our 3 divisions, we can still be the tip of the spear and drive the allies across China and towards victory. That will be the goal for part 4.
Dem haben wir es geschworen.